This week, in a crazy turn of events, the F1 drivers are stepping out of their cars, they're putting their racing suits aside, and they're stepping onto the diamond for a classic game of baseball down in Mexico City.
They're replacing the steering wheels with helmets and gloves.
At least that's our impression of the Mexico track, the Autódromo, right? It's a baseball stadium, right?
Yeah.
Welcome to Turn 1, a Formula One podcast. Now entering the grid. Here are your hosts, Thomas and Jeremiah.
Welcome back to another Turn 1 podcast race preview with your host, Jeremiah.
And Thomas.
Today, we're going to talk about the Autódromo Hermanos Rodríguez as we go to Mexico City.
This is one of the more fun tracks on the circuit because like Baku and Azerbaijan, like Jeddah, like a couple others on the F1 calendar, you got some really fast sections on this track, mainly that huge home straightaway at the Autódromo. That is one of the longest, if not the longest, pure straight tracks. Like Baku's got a little bit of a curve here or there in it. This is just flat out for like a mile or so.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I've got some stats on the miles per hour that we get into when we get here. We'll get to that here in a little bit. But first, I do want to talk about the track layout. We have 17 turns, a lot of them very fast. Defining features, turn 13 enters an old baseball stadium, which is wild. I've got some other facts for you in that when we get down to fun facts, but I did want to mention that.
The other thing is, so, Formula E is starting to gain some traction, and so we're able now to compare the F1 circuits with the Formula E circuits, because Formula E races on many of the same tracks that Formula 1 does, but they've kind of got to modify them to fit the Formula E style, the speed of these cars, the way that they maneuver through the tracks. The Formula 1 circuit at Autódromo Hermanos is 4.3 kilometers, or just over 2.6 miles. The Formula E circuit, 2.6 kilometers, 1.6 miles, almost half the distance. Why?
They use the oval, which the F1 drivers don't even use because it's not part of the track layout whatsoever for F1. But they do use the oval with like a little tail that trails off at the end, and then also they just cut into the oval and made a chicane right in the middle of it. It's very small. I guess it's because, the cars aren't as fast. It's not going to be, it's super long if they try to do the entire F1 track.
Is it because maybe too that home straightaway or that main straight is so long that the speed of the Formula E cars wouldn't be on showcase, or is that burn too much battery power, them just going full out for that long, that significant part of a race?
Probably both, because we know that the reason why Formula One hasn't made the transition to fully electric is because the power is just not there. The speed is just not there. So I would imagine that they hit that main straight in a Formula E car and they're probably maxing out within a couple seconds of being on the track or that straight.
But just to wrap up the layout, the Formula 1 circuit, at least, this doesn't go usually up in the top, elites of tracks. It's not put up there with the Monacos and things like that. But in terms of layout and design, this is a tough track to navigate. The first half of the track, like you mentioned, is pure speed because it's one straightaway. But then the back half of the track, super technical. You have a couple of different hairpins. You have a really fast chicane section that if you've ever tried to pull off on the F1 video games, it is almost impossible to stay on the track unless you lift and coast a little bit. And then, of course, you have that stadium section, which not only you come on from a full stop, like you're going down a DRS section, fully slam on your brakes, then you do a chicane through the stadium. You've got the fans screaming and yelling the last laps. You've got fireworks going off. It's an awesome setting that they built there in Mexico.
As far as overall ambiance, that's the big kicker, is the fact that these guys enter a old baseball stadium. with all of the stands still there, still intact, and they're full of F1 fans just screaming at the top of their lungs. That's got to be a heck of an adrenaline boost as you go in there.
I don't know if your Xbox does this, but every time you and I race in Mexico, whichever one finishes first, the winner has the fireworks go off in the game as they're driving through. It always makes my game lag a little bit. So I'm like, oh, someone's going through the stadium. The fireworks are just too much processing power for
Right.
it. What do you want to look at next? A little bit of fastest lap?
Yeah, I'll move into the fastest lap for Formula One, set in 2021 by a Mr. Valteri Bottas. He did a 1 minute 17.774, super fast, hasn't been beaten since. He was in that Mercedes. Man, that's quick. And as always, we do the Porsche Carrera Cup to compare so that you can see the speed differentials between Formula One and some of the other racing series out there. 1 minute 43.593. So here again, almost a 30-second gap between the Formula One cars and the Porsche Carrera Cup.
And I think that falls within kind of our standard range of where the Porsche Cup is off of Formula One. And that makes sense. Like we looked at Coda last week, right? It's a track that incorporates both speed and technical elements. When you have that, the Porsche cars kind of fall in that 20 to 30-second range of differential. It's only whenever you have a full-on fast track that the gap gets closer, or a full-on technical track that the gap gets widened out a little bit more. So certainly interesting. I would be interested to see how quick those Porsche cars get on that straightaway, because they're probably getting up close to their top speed, if not maxing out themselves.
Oh, without a doubt on that straight. And, one of the things that Formula One doesn't specialize in specifically is straight line speed. They are very adept at that, but because of the fact that they need to be able to go into the chicanes and stuff like that, they do have that downforce package, so they are limited in their top speed. That's not the case at this track, which is pretty cool. They have an elevation at this track of 7,342 feet, making it one of the highest tracks on the calendar. This is going to give the drivers kind of an advantage, as teams can kind of run closer to Monaco specs, where they have all of the downforce package and they trying to get as much drag. Unfortunately gives you a bunch of drag, except because of this elevation, they don't have that drag problem. So they're able to run like Monza speeds, but with a Monaco setup, which is super crazy to me.
And tying back to kind of the goal of our podcast, which was we're newish fans to the sport at this point. There's still people that have been fans way longer than we have. It's been 2 years for us or so. And there is always that kind of that argument from the outsiders of the F1 community, like, oh, the Bugatti, Chiron goes 40 miles an hour faster than an F1 car can. Yes, it can. The F1 cars aren't pure speed. Do they go faster? They go 200 plus miles an hour? Yes, but they're built with the turning aspect in mind. You line up any Bugatti model in an F1 car on an F1 track, the F1 is smoking that thing.
Oh, without a doubt, easily.
It's not always about top speed.
No. How fast can you go around the circuit, which is the whole purpose behind these circuit-built cars. I want to get into some of the track history there. 2021 GP, we'll talk about 2021 and we'll talk about 2022 since they're the most recent years, the most recent races held. In 2021, we had Max, Lewis, and Sergio rounding out your top three. Kimi Räikkönen got his last points of his career, finishing 8th. I thought that was pretty sweet, especially being in the Alfa Romeo. Finishing 8th was awesome.
I forgot that he even went to Alfa Romeo.
Yeah, he did.
For me, his career ends with Ferrari.
Well, for most, it ends with Ferrari, considering that's where he got his championship. But he did go to Alfa Romeo for a few years, where he even met a young Charles Leclerc. But in this 2021 GP, he finishes 8th in that Alfa Romeo, getting his last points, which is awesome. Perez became the first Mexican to get a podium in Mexico in 2021. I thought that was cool. I wanted to add that on here.
This was before we were watching F1 live. That was last year was our first year watching it, but we saw this play out on Drive to Survive, and that was a huge deal because they love that dude in Mexico.
Oh, without
like
a doubt.
Like way more than we like Logan Sargent.
Well, they have more to cheer for, to be fair.
Yeah, that is true. If we had like an Oscar Piastri, type,
oh, dude,
type
I'd be
guy,
hyped.
Yeah, but we have Logan Sargent.
Max extends his lead in the championship over Lewis. So at this point, he already had the lead going into that 2021 season at this race, but he just extends it even further, winning this race with Lewis only coming in second. That's all I've got for 2021. I want to touch on 2022. A lot less action in terms of stuff to be able to talk about, kind of big popping things that happened. But a couple things. Sergio jumps Leclerc in the Drivers' Championship, which was sweet, by the way, as this podium rounds out again Max, Lewis, and Sergio Perez for 2 consecutive years.
That, I wonder what we'll see this year. I have a tough time believing that Sergio can be top 3, but kind of like, a major, player in any other sport, football, basketball, whatever, when the time to shine is there, some guys just step up to the plate and do it. And maybe Sergio can get another podium this year.
Oh, especially in front of your home crowd. Come on now.
When all the little kids are in the crowd yelling Checo. And
So I've got some fun facts. I'm going to run through some of them. Maybe if you have anything else you might want to add. I want to
I got a
talk
few
about the baseball stadium.
Yeah.
It's called the Foro Sol, which used to be used by a baseball team down there in Mexico City. It no longer is. And the only purpose that it serves now is for the actual racing that happens there and concerts, with some of the notable performers including Iron Maiden, Paul McCartney, Britney Spears, Metallica, Pink Floyd, Lady Gaga, Madonna, Shakira, U2, and Radiohead and Guns N' Roses. These are all bands that have performed at the stadium.
Excuse you.
What?
Taylor Swift.
Oh, did I not say Taylor Swift? I'm sorry. Taylor Swift also performed at this stadium.
Big Swifties on this podcast we are. We're bandwagon all the way. Whatever's going to get the views, folks. Let's go. But no, that is probably, I mean, outside of just the atmosphere that the Mexico fans create, the baseball stadium is the coolest aspect because it's the only track that drives through like a different stadium that is separate from the F1. Now, of course, they incorporate the grandstands into seating and all that, but it's not like the baseball stadium was made with the idea of it being part of an F1 circuit.
Dude, the adrenaline these drivers must feel as they enter into a stadium full of people to do this short little quick chicane, and everybody's just, yeah, let's go, cheering for whoever's going through it. God, that's got to be so cool.
And it was genius to put a chicane in it because the drivers spend 6 or 7 seconds in that area by doing that chicane. It's not just a fly through.
No, you have to slow down a lot for that chicane.
A lot. And early on in our podcast, so like 8 or 9 months ago, we did an episode on what we like about tracks, right? Like our least favorite tracks and the aspects that we liked about them. And we called out the baseball stadium at Autódromo Hermanos Rodríguez as being one of those defining features. And we said, if they ever do like another Dallas Grand Prix, which if 1984 was any indication, they won't. But if they ever do another Dallas Grand Prix, run the thing through Cowboy Stadium and put a big chicane in the middle of the thing. I mean, you would fill that with 100,000 people just right there.
Oh, absolutely. Now, granted, that would mean it's in Arlington and not Dallas, but that's fine. Who cares? We'll still claim
they've been skirting that line for years.
Yeah, I mean, they're called the Dallas Cowboys, and they play in Arlington, so...
Before you get to your next ones, I have a couple questions for you.
Okay.
If you were to guess, which engine manufacturer has the most wins at this circuit, who would you guess?
Oh, man.
Engine manufacturer.
Max has won the last 2. I'm going to go with Honda.
It is Honda.
Right.
I thought that was so out of left field. I would have thought, Mercedes or Ferrari or even Ford, because Ford had a major play early on in Formula One. But no, Honda, number 1 with 5 wins. Then you have a tie for second with 3 wins each. Ford, Mercedes, and Climax?
I've never, ever in my life heard
1962 through 1964, Climax, the engines won 3 Mexican Grand Prix.
Well done.
Last question for you. If you had to guess who's tied at the top for constructors in terms of most wins at this track, who would you guess? There's 2 with 4 wins each.
Okay, so that can't be Red Bull then. 2 with 4 wins each. I'm going to go Ferrari, and this track's been around forever. So McLaren?
Incorrect.
Mm.
Ferrari has only won twice, 1970 and 1990. McLaren has won 3 times, 69, 88, and 89.
So who has 4 each?
No modern wins. Get ready for this. Lotus, 62, 63, 67, and 68, 4 wins. And Red Bull, you called out 2 of Max Verstappen's wins, but not his other 2 wins, 2017 and 2018.
Before that break that they had where it wasn't on the calendar. Dang it.
Yep. So Max Verstappen has single-handedly put Red Bull at the top of wins, tied with Lotus.
All right.
And then, of course, Mercedes has 3 as well, 2015, 16, and 19. Pretty much every year that Red Bull hasn't won it, they were winning it. So, yeah, I just found that super interesting that you have Honda at the top of the engine manufacturers for a race. I think that's rare. I could be wrong, but Honda's usually not at the top of the list in F1 statistics. And then you had Red Bull and Lotus dominating all the other historic constructors in terms of performance of this track. Especially Ferrari hasn't won this race in 33 years.
Oh, no.
Now, granted, they haven't been running it consistently, but still.
That's rough.
Okay, what do you have for final facts?
Final facts, I've got the modern F1 cars reaching top speeds of about 230 miles per hour around this track, which is absolutely ridiculous. That's Monza numbers, 100%.
Isn't Valtteri's top speed at this track like 131 or so?
Was it this track that he hit it?
It might have been. I'll look it up real quick while you hit the next one.
231, not 131?
Yeah, definitely not 131.
My final fact that I have for you was actually about the conception of this track. So this track was actually designed as a thesis by a student named Oscar Fernandez back in 1953. I thought that was wild.
Absolutely ridiculous that somebody was like, you know what? I'm going to do an academic paper about this.
Right.
That's something that you would pull off. You would be like, you know what? How do I get around actually having to do some kind of...
Oh, yeah. I would make my entire project around something fun like that, designing an F1 track. And then with my luck, I definitely wouldn't have the track actually come into conception. But kudos to that man.
And just to bring it back to our last note on top speed, it was the 2016 Mexican Grand Prix. Valtteri Bottas recorded 231.4.
Jeez.
On that main straightaway that talked about. So we talked about this. I think Baku might actually be longer, but because it's not fully flat out, or maybe there's something to do with the temperature or the track surface, they just go faster in Mexico.
It's about the elevation. We talked about this. The 7,342 feet up in the air, they're able to run those very, very strong in cornerings setups, like a Monaco setup or something like that. But we will have that reduced drag thanks to the elevation, because that thin air isn't really going to make a difference on the aerodynamics and all the drag. So you will get those insane top speeds of Monza, which I just love about this track.
Okay, you ready to put ourselves out there again where we've been 100% wrong? Or not 100% wrong, but not really right either.
Hey, I got 2 out of 3 last week. I don't know what you're talking about.
I know. We just need to get 3 out of 3 one of these weeks.
All right. Don't put Oscar Piastri number 1 then. Let's hear what you got.
He's not even going to be mentioned. What are your top 3?
Me?
Yeah. What are your top 3?
Give me, for the 3rd year in a row, Verstappen, Hamilton, and Sergio Checo Perez.
You know, the obviously Hamilton, you could go back and forth on that number 2 spot. It could be a McLaren, could it be a Ferrari, whatever, but I think Hamilton's a solid 2 pick there. Sergio is the real wild card here, right? Because he hasn't been performing at a podium level for a while this year. I mean, it's been super inconsistent outside of the first half of the year when he had 2 wins. He just fell off when Max really got into form. Sergio fell off in his recovery drives. While they've been good in getting points, they haven't been elite in getting podium points.
Right.
So that's the wild card. So Jeremiah goes Verstappen, Hamilton, Perez. Give me Max to win. I'm not going to put Norris or Piat. I've had my McLaren run. Look, I was a McLaren fan for 2.5 weeks. I'm done with it. I'm going back to my Red Bull team that consistently wins.
Yeah, obviously.
Give me Verstappen 1. In the 3rd spot, let me skip number 2 for a second. In this 3rd spot, give me Lando Norris. The dude has been performing. He's been losing it a little bit at the end of the race, whether it be to his own teammate or whether it be to Lewis Hamilton. Let's say that he pieces it together in Mexico. Give me Norris in the 3rd spot.
Okay.
And in the 2 spot, do I go Hamilton? Do I go Leclerc? Do I go Sainz? Give me the hometown kid, Checo Perez, with the silver medal.
For his highest finish ever.
Red Bull is pulling out all the stops. They are going to do everything in their power to get that guy on the podium. When Sergio starts high, he finishes high. If he can have a good quality performance, there's no sprint, right? Like there's no sprint
it's a
race.
regular weekend.
Regular weekend, they can do all their regular stuff with the car. They can get him in great position to quali well. Maybe they can get Max to give him a little slipstream, a little drift, a little something in qualifying. Put Sergio in the top 2 on the grid, and he finishes in the top 2 because he is, after all, the Minister of Defense.
All right. I'm here for it.
Look, man, I root for the hometown team. I don't know what you're doing. Put him in 3rd. That's disrespectful at this point.
It's a podium. He hasn't had a podium in a fortnight.
After I just finished a 10-minute tirade about him not finishing high enough in the points. All right, what do you expect out of this race?
I only have one expectation for this race. I want to see both Aston Martins in the points. That's my thing for this. Lance Stroll had a strong finish at the end of last race. I want to see him continue his form, at least get 10th, man. Come on. And Fernando Alonso, he was on pace to get an awesome recovery drive last week before his car crapped out on him. So give me both Aston Martins in the points in Mexico City.
Okay, let me take the more realistic approach. Give me one Aston Martin and give me one Alpine in the points.
Jeez.
Neither of both. We both in the past couple of weeks both predicted, double Aston Martin points finishes, double Alpine points finishes. No, one each. That's all they can manage to pull off ever. And give me an AlphaTauri as well, sneaking into the points. We've seen Yuki doing middle of the road. So middle of the road usually can get you in the 10th spot sometimes. And who knows, maybe Daniel Ricciardo just needed 1 week to get things back, in Austin and Coda, get the feel back under his wrist that he broke a couple weeks ago. Maybe he has a better result in Mexico and puts it in the points. Outside of that, I don't expect any huge shakeups. I think our top finishers are still going to be the Red Bulls, the McLarens, the Mercedes. There's going to be some fighting between Mercedes and McLaren. Ferrari might work their way into a fight. Who knows? But I think throughout the rest of the season, pretty much form is going to hold unless we have some major technical shakeups, like the McLarens have to start from the pit lane like the Aston Martins did last week, or something like that that's really going to throw a wrench in the results. But I think we're kind of seeing where this year is going to play out.
Oh, and finally, as always, give me Albon in the points.
Did he get points in USGP?
Yeah, both Williams.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Barely.
Look at Sargent. Look at that.
Don't give me Sargent in the points. I'm not saying that.
The guy that predicted him to have 5 points finishes and now backing away from any and all points finishes.
He got one.
Just needs to finish the last 5 races.
Look, man, I expected more from the kid. I did not expect that to happen. This has been a rough year for him.
All right, so check us out on our social media. We are trying to get a lot more into the short form videos. We're posting TikToks a couple times a week now. We're posting YouTube Shorts, some Instagram Reels. Check us out on there. It's different than the content that we put on here. It's not storytelling or anything like that. It's fun and games and bringing up quick hitting topics like who's bringing upgrades to certain races or what upgrades have played out for teams. So check us out on there. You can also obviously watch the race and qualifying Saturday and Sunday this week, and then join us next week for a recap. And then we have, I think, a week off before we go to the Brazilian Grand Prix, I believe.
The Autódromo José Carlos Pace.
All right, what do you got for him this week?
Guys, I don't know if you're going to be on the same boat as me in this one, but I hope that you are when I say that AlphaTauri just might win a race this year. In fact, they just might win in Brazil.
So not this week.
No.
All right, we'll see you guys.
Bye, guys.